welcome to Nuu-chah-nulth territory. I'm Tima'a from Nuu-chah-nulth region, and my English name is Gordon Dick, and I'd like to welcome and introduce Kelly Robinson from Ahozit and Nuu-chah Nation, from his dad's side and his mother's side. He's wealthy with two nations to introduce his roots to individuals.
I think you just gave it all away. That was my introduction. The other Nuu-chah-nulth root I have is Diddy Dot, which is my grandfather from the Robinson side. My grandmother Elsie's from the Little side, which is from Ahozit. I don't know too much about my Nuu-chah-nulth roots. That's why I'm living in Port Alberni now, to familiarize myself and try to gather as much knowledge as I can to help myself along my way. More than often, I identify myself as Nuu-chah because that's where I grew up with my relatives and brothers, sisters, my uncles, and I got a lot of foundational teachings from them. So yeah. That's what I carry most, and I'm really looking forward to my educational journey with the Nuu-chah-nulth people. Mm.
Part of our meeting today is just to kind of your view and my view, our thoughts in regards to just the history of the region of Nuu-chah-nulth, the art form, the culture, and just how you and I view it, how you and I have had some conversations in the past, and I'm sure we'll still have plenty more in regards to the material that we're using, that we're fortunate enough to use today, and how that will look like, what it may look like in 10 and 15 and 20 years, which you and I will still most likely have access to old growth cedar, but how the artists that may follow
aren't going to have that luxury.
Yes.
In my time as an artist, I've only been in it 10 years now, which is quite some time for me, but it's such a short period. It's just an introduction, I believe, to the art. In my time and my experience of speaking to other artists that are older, the wood supply is just not there. Me and you see pretty nice stuff because I believe we're go-getters. We go find as much of the best stuff that we can access as in our personal lives. And from my experience, a lot of the older artists, they say you just can't get this stuff today. What we had access to, like right in front, they said it was everywhere. When the market was back in the 90s and 80s, they said everybody had access to it. Now it's getting pretty scarce, which I haven't had a problem with getting it myself, but we have to prepare for the youth that are coming, right?
Absolutely.
And in Bella Coola alone, I know we only have a few more stands of old growth cedar in our territory.
Right.
I don't know much about Nuu-chah-nulth country, but in Bella Coola alone, there's a big resurgence of artists, and we're carving a lot now. So,
yeah.
So in Nuu-chah-nulth country, and if you take the whole Northwest Coast as one, we got to start preparing for something that's coming, big change that's coming, I believe.
As we've talked about that, just the whole change, the whole elevation from from us having, our ancestors living the culture, having the connection with nature, and then it going to, the darker times of Canada, of the government and churches outlawing it, and then practicing and hiding it and hiding in secret with ceremony. That's the only reason why you and I and all the other West Coast artists are able to still carve now. Just in a big part is, as we've said, the majority is commercial. Very few pieces are for ceremony these days.
Yeah, I don't want to put all the pressure on the big market that's pushing all these carvers on the Northwest Coast, because I know there's other markets, right? There's all the shake and shingle that's going out. Yeah. Like those are huge markets. There's all the lumber around the world. The demand for red cedar is, what I got told, it's at an all-time high right now. Absolutely. So that within itself, and you're absolutely right that the rights finally got turned around back in the 60s, I believe. Was it the 60s? For our right to carve and practice potlatching again.
Yeah, late 60s.
Late 60s? Yeah, so if you put that into perspective, we've only been carving for how long? We're at the infant stage of our culture right now. From what was taken away. So how long is that going to last? I don't know, but we're actually lucky to be carving within the last 50, 60 years of whatever it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it, like the resurgence of, the younger generation in Nuu-chah territory carving, which I don't see it yet, and I'm hoping that we'll see it in Nuu-chah-nulth territory, it being kind of allowed to practice and carve and sing and dance and create pieces which are our roots. There was still that major delay, major gap, because it wasn't just the success of like not wanting to be First Nations. So now there's that movement of saying, yes, this is our roots, and now, but it's important to think about how does the
identity crisis play along with the resurgence of all the new artists coming and how we're portraying ourselves in society. The biggest one I've always said is identity for us, and the wood that we're carving today plays a huge role in identifying us as Northwest Coast, Nuu-chah-nulth people, Nuu-chah people, Kwakwaka'wakw people. It plays a big role in who we are. It's a face. So us looking after this in a way where we almost have no control of it, it's not waiting for the issues to come to us. It's how we're going to anticipate what's coming and how we're going to adapt to it. And I believe a lot of our nations don't see the change that's coming. Yeah. We don't see 3 steps ahead here, and we got to start looking into that.
It's because of society is moving so fast.
You kind of get what you get while you're here, and you take, and that's it.
And as I shared with you before, it's like you and me right now, we're right here. But we're trying to reach back here to kind of learn and gather information and knowledge and teaching, is the way I look at it. Because Nuu-chah-nulth isn't my first dialect. I have this English accent. Nuu-chah isn't your first dialect. So it's changing, and that's just inevitable.
We could go out and stockpile and act as the, oh God, it's almost, it's not hypocritical to what we're preaching, but it's like we go out and take as much as we can from the forest, because we have no control of what's going to be taken in the future. Is that the only option we have for traditional use? That's a really disgusting way of looking at it, because we're adding to the issue as well.
Yeah, we are.
It's like, are we just going to go take a big abundance for the next 200 years of carving so we could have ceremonial red cedar in our... Like, if we can't look this far ahead, who are we as a people for the grandchildren to come? It's not... What does it say about us when we're gone? Is that a mistake? I don't know. I really don't know. But all me and you are worried about is these carvings that are on the wall and how we're going to make our next meal, which is, you put in all those factors and where does it leave us?
It's just us trying to navigate today's society and trying to connect with our culture, trying to connect with nature, and trying to talk to our mentors, our inspiration of, in many ways. Like, they're not necessarily all wood carvers and artists. They're elders that have that teaching, and it falls on you and I and the other artists that how do we want to we need to make the time to you've said it, we need to make time to speak to the elders, the elder wood the carvers, Tim Paul, Joe David, Ron Hamilton, and then even elders in general, of just what they were taught and what they showed and what knowledge they've held on to, what gifts that they've seen over their lifetime. And how do we connect with that? And how do you and I share the value and importance of the future to the extremely busy society and the extremely busy generation that's following?
It almost has to be a mutual agreement between the elders, the youth, society, the government. It has to be some sort of mutual understanding. Because if you look at everything as a whole, it's the salmon. It's the salmon to the trees, to the carvings, whereas the government looks at us as we're like a commodity. What are other countries going to do when they come here and there's no salmon and there's no red cedar carvings? There's no First Nations people. There's no authenticity here. So we're only as good as how long this is going to last. So if we don't look after the salmon and the trees, what are we? Who are we? There's so many factors with all our wood carving tools that we've got taught to make with the steel. Is that all going to go on the back dusty shelf?
Yeah, well...
We're not going to be able to wood carve one day?
Some artists today don't have knives, don't have an elbow adze.
I know that, but if you take all of them and you put all those tools on the back shelf, and we're all dealing with something else, where is it going to leave us? That identity crisis of the government putting us as commodities, where they're not going to be able to showcase these photos of authenticity of a big house and people drumming and dancing, which they sell as a tourism platform. That's what I mean. Like, once the government has no use for us as a money making whatever they're... Once their time is done with making money, they don't have a resource.
Yeah, we're not fashionable.
Yeah. Anything along those lines. What's going to come up? That's what we have to start anticipating now. And you in your seat in Nuu-chah-nulth territory, me representing the Hausa and Nuu-chah-nulth, we have big seats to fill. We have, at a time like this, it's one of the most tumultuous times, but at the same time, it's one of the most exciting times in the world. Yeah. So that's the way I try to look at it. It's exciting. We're at a time that in history, we never anticipated stuff like this. There's no big hardships. There is a lot of hardships in our villages, but where we are compared to my parents, my grandparents, we're lifetimes. Yeah. Like, we got a lot of opportunity in front of us, but at the same time, we got to anticipate all this change. And for us, the new minds coming up that are gonna, I believe one day are gonna transform into something amazing for the next generation beyond us, I just see excitement. But we have to play our cards right. A lot of it's just getting by, honestly. Yeah. Like, yeah. In my life, I'm like, I got all these ideas of the future and how to anticipate it, but sometimes it just gets so overwhelming that I'm just, God, I'm just trying to get by. It's tough
to have that goal for the future when you're just trying to get through day to week to month.
Yeah.
Of just the obstacles of today's society. Could you imagine if there were no phone calls, no emails, you didn't have to go and get groceries, and your gift and goal for your community is to carve and create. So today, you and I, and and then Tim and Joe, all of them had to navigate all of that.
I couldn't imagine what teachings they had given to them to survive, not thrive, to survive in society. There's a huge difference there, and what we're doing now is we got a platform of thriving now.
Right.
And I don't know, the tool pouch that those guys carried and are daily evolving, Tim is, I bet, that he has to work in business, he has to work in just everyday life, purchasing a house, right, running his business as an artist.
Having a pension.
Yeah, it's so, like, I don't know where he comes from. I could read on his profile or his bio, I mean. Bio, yeah. I could read on his bio of what he's gone through, but to actually sit down with him and talk to him about his parents and the knowledge they gave him to adapt in society is unfathomable almost. It's almost how he's come that far to transfer to us. Now we have to do that. Like it's our turn now. So that's where
society, Tim he attributes that his parents, yes, but his grandparents and his uncle were the ones that really took him along, and he has that really ancient teaching. And then still, like you're saying, how he adapts to today when he was growing up and then living in Victoria as a young man and then raising a family and being a career artist. Those are major accomplishments.
Yeah, I know. When I look at that, and I've had an identity crisis in my life because being First Nations, it's like I've always said, Canada looks at us like the scar of Canada. Realistically, in my personal opinion, I don't believe majority of Canada looks highly on First Nations people. So if you look at Tim's situation, because me and you have to 100%, 110% identify as First Nations, because that's what we do. We've got to explain ourselves daily. We got to put our face on our masks and say, this is who we are. if you put that into perspective for Tim in the 80s and 70s, how hard was that? When there was no, like a lot of the stuff coming out today is just, it's through social media. These young kids getting film of this, films of how the underlying racism in Canada is actually alive and well. Whereas back in the 70s, nobody knew about it. Nobody knew that girl went missing or that boy went missing. It was all hearsay or later down the road, and it was all about what the parents and uncles and aunties told their story to each other, and that nobody ever heard that person. A lot of the First Nations didn't have a voice at that time.
Absolutely. And like I say, it wasn't the success of the government and the church was, you didn't want to have a voice of the First Nations people. You didn't want to be associated as First Nation. I've had friends and family members tell me that they said, we didn't want to go to a potlatch. We didn't want to sing and dance. So there was that disconnection. And then now myself and you and others are trying to have a connection. It's not going to be the same.
That's a whole topic within itself. It does play into our careers as artists. At the same time we're dealing with all of that, then we got to deal with the shortage of our supply for our careers. So
my boy says this to me. He says, he quoted Muhammad Ali. He says, well, in a 30-year span, he says, you have 15, 16 years tops to accomplish things. In 30 years, you have 15, 16 years of that. Because there's just your life, your sleep, your family. It made me stop and think, and I'm like, that's so true. You could say, like, you've been at this 10 years, I've been at this over 25, I'm in my 26th year, but there's just so much with society now, and just, like you said, navigating, getting through day to day, and then still trying to plan for the future, and still trying to see what importance of what we do will affect the future, and what we should try and do, and try and steer to shine a light on the importance of these specific things, of the material that we work with the singing and dancing, and this is what I've been thinking about for years, is how do you and I and Tim and Joe and everyone else, all the artists, how does this art form and the culture inspire and make a younger generation go, yeah, I want to, yes, this is my roots. Yes, I want to connect more with it. Yes, I want to learn and do this. And what is that going to look like for them?
it's almost a silly question, because today's society and the young kids, how they're social media, they're socially driven through social media in that sense, where it's like Gordon Dick becomes the most famous artist out of Nuu-chah-nulth country. He gets all this recognition through kind of this national stage. And the new kids today, they couldn't see that until you hit that stage. Whereas the roles in the community, it's not as impactful as when they see a big stage like of this world famous artist, world famous singer, world famous this, world famous that.
Which I came across this, the latest trend for the younger generation as a career is for social media, for promoting and staging fake famous is the term. So it's taking a fake, a set of a private jet. Like that's like you and me sitting in a private jet, and they're photographing it and saying, "This is so and so flying to their next location," and that's society of like now, instant gratification.
So that's what one of the most important things Ron Hamilton said to me was, I said, "How come you're not in the market, Ron?" He said, "There's enough artists in the market, because that's all we do now." And I said, "But why aren't you in the market?" He goes, "Well, the great pieces, the best pieces on the Northwest Coast are in the museums. We're just touching on the surface of the level of expertise that the old nations had. The art, the great art that represents us is in the museum." And Ron said, I spent my whole career trying to get the best art. Where that best art came from initially was from our villages. Now the best art coming out of our villages is going on a stranger's wall. So he goes, "Why would I support that?" He goes, "That's why I spent my entire life trying to get the best art out of myself back into my community where it belongs." So that's the whole, I don't know how to reverse that. That's a really tough one to discuss. And I've been working with grant money, getting my best pieces back in my community. That's the only way I see it, because for some selfish reason, I believe early in my career when I was making $5 an hour, if not less, trying to make a living, no one was recognizing me, going through the hardships. And now I'm doing okay as an artist financially. It's the recognition in my selfishness that kind of pushes me in that direction of trying to be a national artist. And not, I personally, what I see on the Northwest Coast is I am giving a lot back to my community, a lot more than other artists. But majority it's such a selfish profession.
It is.
It's all for ourselves. But at the same time, I'm putting my spirit in. I believe I'm putting my soul and my spirit into my pieces.
Yeah. And it's your soul and your spirit and your roots, your story, not a museum curator to share to the national level. So yes, it's selfish, but yes, it needs to, in my opinion, why should someone else, why should some curator or someone in Germany, or, there was a piece in Germany, what my eye picked up on this piece that was in a glass case, it was beautifully done, and it was listed as Nuu-chah art, and I said, well, first, need to address the labeling in here. It needs to be Nuu-chah-nulth art. And then I said, I looked at a number of pieces, and I looked at this one, and I said, well, this is a beautiful piece. I said, but my opinion is that this is mislabeled. It's a Nuu-chah piece because of the lip that you pointed out to me years before. And so I'm in the Germany Museum, and I say that to this curator, this anthropologist in Germany, and she just looked at me like I was speaking Greek, like I was, from another planet, to kind of question their history, what they feel like they documented. They took it and they documented it, and they have it right. And it annoyed me because it's not their history.
All it is a commodity. And when I went to the MOA and I got to go look at a few pieces, and the first thing they did is they brought me into a room with all this new scientific equipment to keep the pieces safe, all these great cameras and all this, I don't know what it was, some sort of lighting, and they had all these machines. And they're like, you got to see this. And I asked the curator, I said, what is the purpose in all this? And I asked her, and she didn't really give me an answer. And I asked her how many people come and see these pieces, the Northwest Coast collection alone. And she goes, it's our biggest, it's like the biggest division, it's the biggest, everybody comes into MOA to see.
The biggest draw.
Yeah, out of all the pieces that they have, like worldly pieces. And I was sitting there looking at a piece that came from my village, and I was looking at all the money spent, and I asked her, where does the funds come for all of this here? Who hires you? I asked them all that, and they kind of started gathering that I was starting to be the devil's advocate in it all. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, these guys, like, they want to portray First Nations people as they know us, not as we present ourselves. And it just puzzled me why they weren't, the government or whoever is running it, why they weren't putting time to get to know the actual people who created these pieces. Yeah. Whereas all they looked at is, we can make money off of this and we could draw a crowd to come have a look. But if we look at all of that, it's almost, do we have time as artists? I don't. It all comes down to the clock. I don't believe in my time. If I don't get a foundation of art, now this is how we're going to transfer over into the foundation of Nuu-chah-nulth art, is if we don't build a great foundation for the artists to come, which is design. I believe it's 100% design. I have no time to worry about those different things. There's so much as a First Nations person to take in negative ways.
You could get pulled in all sorts of
and I just don't. I couldn't start a course and teach Nuu-chah-nulth kids culture. I can't teach them singing. We have a tiny window of time, and that's why I keep coming back to the clock. That time is just to teach the art, period, nothing else.
That's our role.
And we don't even have enough time to learn. So that's what I'm saying. It's what, do we have time to worry about the wood that's going to come in? Do we have time to fight for our trees to save them? Do we have time to fight for numerous things? Our salmon, for one, is the big one. What are we without our salmon? Yeah. We're almost, like, what are we without salmon?
We're hurting.
Yeah, it's just there's so many factors. Yeah. But it comes down to foundation. I believe if we could build something, like there's Tim Paul, Joe David, Ron Hamilton, Joe Martin, Art Thompson, Carl Martin. But those four, I believe, with Joe Martin, Joe and Carl, those four artists, visually they've done a lot for us, for Nuu-chah-nulth. They've reached, like, they put up a pretty big mountain of art. Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is it was not 100% individual, but they didn't, I believe there's 3 of them left, and I believe that if we work with them to build a foundation for the next, we may have a chance at seeing Nuu-chah-nulth art flourish. Right. And it might open up doors that mean you can't see. So that's what I believe is what we should be focusing on. And we don't really have a say in the supply of wood that's coming out of the forest.
That's the reality of it, yeah.
Yeah, we have no say.
Yeah.
Like the market and the government and
even the
corporations.
and even the communities, because that's the other thing, because logging is clear-cut majority, that now there's just because of the shift in First Nations being able to assert their saying, well, this is our traditional lands, now the big corporations are wanting to say, well, you know, we want to play nice with you. We want to partner with you so that they can go in and log. And so that's the other shift. And that's even so what I'm getting at is even our own communities trying to survive and trying to navigate and provide for the community, they're having to partner up in some, you know, in a lot of ways. A lot of times they'll partner up with logging outfits because, you know, it's kind of that, you know, if we don't, someone else will, or, you know, it's kind of like, let's take it now before someone else does.
Take what you can before it all just gets taken. I don't.
And that's with the fishing too. I did a piece years ago, and I did it out of stone and wood carving. And it was on the mountaintops, how my grandfather showed me to triangulate from the reef, the mountain, and the island, what our fishing holes were down Barkley Sound.
The real issue is the value system now.
Yeah.
So that's just like our art. And if we don't develop a great foundation and a value system in our art, where does it leave you? It leaves you with a guy who just looks after himself, who doesn't appreciate the stories, looks at them as myths. He doesn't. Myths
and marketing.
Yeah, and it's a really selfish business, and it's something it's almost it's nerve-wracking that we're forced almost into that direction as a people. So the foundation is all we could do, I believe. Yeah. Is all we could do as a people for the art. And if we don't develop it, we're going to really be kicking ourselves.
Yeah. And
in how many years' time? Geez, you don't have many years left, Gordy. Yeah, you're done.
I'm still running ahead of you.
Yeah. You better get your act together.
So what I wanted to touch on was that surge in your community of your mom's roots, your Nuu-chah roots. That's in big part because of the curriculum, because of the foundation, which has been in the northern region for decades with the previous school of Kassan, and then now how many years, what? Frida Dazing School is what, 12, 15 years in?
Something like that, yeah.
You've been at it 10 years.
10, 11, 12, probably 15.
Yeah.
Gotta be 15 at least.
So, and as you said, you know, great on all those teachers that, you know, have been taking the time to share all that knowledge.
At the time, I questioned them, and you did too. And I remember you said this to me. You said, that's all because if we had a school down here, we would teach like sweats and singing and culture. Then I went up there, and then I just realized, I'm like, and that's what they told us. They said, you don't have time. Yeah. There's not enough time. It all comes down to the clock. There's just no time. You got to spend the rest of your life. What Dempsey Bob told me, he goes, do you like hockey? I go, yeah, we watch the Canucks. You're not going to like it anymore if you want to be an artist. Yeah. He goes, you got to drop everything. He goes, you got to live like an artist. You got to live on the edge. You got to sacrifice all of this. Just the art, nothing else.
I remember you saying that. Because your response, so when he shared that with the classroom, I remember you saying this, you sharing it with me. You said,
it's like, he's crazy.
So you put up your hand and you said, so I'm just supposed to forget about my family and my kids, and you know, you're kicking dirt as usual as you do.
Yeah.
So
But
it's true.
He's the epitome of an artist though. Like I believe. Like
him and Joe.
Yeah, Joe David as well, yeah. Robert Davidson, Bo Dick,
yeah.
Tim Paul. I like Tim because he's family orientated.
Tim's
Really,
really family. Those, you know.
that I like that.
Yeah.
I think he's richer in that sense because there's just
Because
there's so much to life, right?
there is a sacrifice. There is a sacrifice as artists, as myself and other artists have talked about and touched on, and you know that. Like, you know, would you like to go in, you know, it's summertime? Would you like to go and just chill and, you know, float down the river in a tube?
100%.
Yeah. But
I'm just kidding.
But-
I spend my entire summer carving.
well, actually, that's what you do all the time, all summer. You're just tubing. I'm carving.
Funny guy.
So, but it is the sacrifice that you and I and myself, you know, Kevin, you know, the Colonel, you know, all these artists that, and it's like Dempsey said, you gotta, if you know, I find the mornings are best for me. If it's like 5 o'clock in the morning, I have time to draw, I have time to start carving, and you know, I don't have a phone ringing, I don't have a email to, you know, I have done some emails in the morning and then they're done out of my way, but yeah, time is the hottest commodity for an artist, for people in general, but for an artist, it's, you know.
Everything we're talking about is quality of life.
Yeah.
And just like what I said to you, I said to my Uncle Al, I said, what he said to me, he goes, I said, how could you put a piece like that out where you just rushed it? You done so-and-so pieces this day, and I'm like, I couldn't be happy with that. Yeah. And he looked at me and he goes, that's you, Kelly, that's your story, he said to me. And he goes, and he says, that has nothing to do with me and your expectations of your village and who you come from. That has nothing to do with it, he said to me. And he goes, it all comes down to what, he said. And he kind of questioned me. And I said, I didn't know, I just said, I believe Nuu-chah-nulth is up here. And we got to reach that. In my time, I want to reach the highest pinnacle of whatever is in me. And he goes, but that's you. He goes, it all comes down to the quality of life and your happiness. He goes, that artist may put out this work that's not up to his like highest degree of expertise, but he goes, this artist over here, he could be the best in the world, but if he's not happy with him, his life and his family, what's the use? Yeah. So that's what he said to me, and then I realized, he goes, all that judgment that I was putting on other people, it had no time in my life in what I was creating. Yeah. So it really opened my eyes to what was in my head when I was carving, when I was creating, right? But the foundation is what's going to fuel that.
And then that's what I was touching on with your community at home and with your mom's side is you're seeing that because there is that foundation of curriculum which isn't here in Nuu-chah-nulth territory, in my opinion, in a sense of like being able to go and say, you know, you could talk to this artist or go to the elementary school or the high school and say, you know, here's a book of Nuu-chah-nulth art. This is what are the visual signatures. This is kind of the regional within Nuu-chah-nulth territory, which was more common. This eye shape, this oval, this soft split U, these hard geometric lines, you know, that isn't accessible yet.
Yeah, it's that foundation that has to be developed. If it's not developed, there's going to be a lot of, like you said, it's the time. Yeah. Time's irreplaceable, and if we don't use that time wisely, it's not gonna amount to as much as our expectations are of the art. of the artists that are coming up.
Yeah.
And we could, if we have a place to change that mindset and that foundation of the new art that's coming, it should be taken with the utmost care, the utmost responsibility, right? I think.
Yeah.
And Ron, Tim, and Art are just, they're not young bucks anymore. I hate to say it, Joe, but you're not young anymore.
But one of the in the time that I've been carving and what I've been learning and designing, when I'm and I'll thank you again. Back up 10 years ago, you kind of made me stop and look at things with student eyes, have my student ears on, even though I'd been at it 15, 16 years when you were just jumping in, and that's made me go, there's always opportunity to be a student. And you need to, me as an individual, I need to just stop and just quit looking over my shoulder on that next bill, that next, payment, which was tough to do.
It's really tough to do when you're early and you're, you can't, you have to look at that stuff. It's not even and it's being able to,
and it's fighting that balance of, okay, I want to get this cleaner, I want to get this better, I want to get this to flow more, something isn't feeling right there, but okay, for me, I was like, okay, this is the best that I could do at this moment, and I got to be okay with that. That was me learning as an artist, as an individual, and as in today's society.
it's just like the panel work, eh?
Yeah.
It's like you see all the steps and you're like, this is just a process. Yeah. But it's being comfortable in the process. That's why I like working with masks, totem poles and stuff, because it's like you're constantly trying to figure stuff out. You're trying to work through it. Whereas a panel, it's like, it's all figured out.
Yeah, all the bevels and planes and dishes, it's because it's that more of that deeper two-dimensional.
We got to understand that it's practice with the knife, handiwork with the knife as well.
Muscle memory. I like to share this. And it was one guy in my community that came to me and says, I want to carve a piece. I said, oh, okay. Well, what do you want to carve? He's like, well, I thought I'd just keep it simple, and I just want to do like a human face. And I was just like, I said, well, that's starting at like the highest level, in my opinion. Where I'm at is what you're going to try and achieve, just all those angles and curves and levels. It's just, and he just kind of looked at me like I was, yeah, sure. And then once he got into it, and then he would be like, man, he says, like, it just took so long. Like I was shaping it down, and then I stopped and looked at it. I'm like, well, wait, I just went past the area where I should have stopped. So now I got to go back and carve this one down. But now I got to, change the nostrils because that, and then I got to change the mouth. And I'm like, yeah. I said, then you got to look at all your angles and curves. And that's where the curriculum of design and foundation, and then, just kind of sharing and opening up the eyes to other artists of.
The only way that worked for me on a personal level is visually seeing it daily and practicing it daily. So when I spoke to Ron Hamilton, I asked him for the 3 similar to ovoid shapes that we use, Nuu-chah-nulth, and he gave them to me, which I'm thankful for, and I just haven't practiced them. I haven't tried to perfect them, and there's so much more to Nuu-chah-nulth art, but the thing about it is, I don't have too many photos of old Nuu-chah-nulth art. I haven't witnessed a lot of it. I haven't witnessed the dances much, maybe once or twice. Whereas in Nuu-chah, Bella Coola, I grew up in the dances. I know our songs, I know our dances. What I don't know is our language. And that's a big one that plays such a big part in all of the culture. Because if I know the language, then those stories and songs are like prayers, in my opinion, is that they're told to me and they're held closely. Whereas I hear a translation somewhat of that song, I know some of where it comes from, but it's not totally indulged. So Nuu-chah-nulth, the art alone, like what you said, we're on a clock, and that clock's just not, we don't have enough time in that clock. So all those factors, what I just said, I have to put that into Nuu-chah-nulth art. What am I left with? What do I have in front of me? Not a whole lot. I'm 40 years old almost. So that time is just ticking away. Wait a minute, I thought you were 45, Kelly. But anyways, that within itself, I know the stories that you've told me, but visually, these new artists, we have to have stories with all these old masks and a curriculum of shapes. And if that, what I have to do before I even step to the surface, I have to do that. I have to do my 10,000 hours in Nuu-chah-nulth art before I can teach it. I believe. Like I have to just repetitive. Then it gives me the ability to create off of that.
You and I were, last year before, we were talking about the curriculum, about,
That's not even including carving.
Yeah, I know. Like let's say by the end of 2021, someone says to us, we want you guys to develop an art book of the curriculum, of foundation of what makes it visually a signature and style of Nuu-chah-nulth art. What would you and I come up with? It's just as us developing still as an artist and trying to still grasp. I've been at this is my 26th year, and for me, still developing and still just starting to get it, to make it, and Tim kind of looked at some of my pieces just recently. He's like, yeah, he says, you're really developing your own style. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm wanting it to still be that visual signature regionally. Yeah, it's gonna, and I said to him, I said, yeah, I know you said to me 15 years ago, I was on a totem pole, and I went to hand him a felt marker, and he's like, because he drew the shapes on the pole, and I chainsawed and got down to that next stage, and I went to hand him the felt pen, and he goes, you draw it on. I said, well, it's your design. He goes, no, you just make it yours. It's your hand. And it's going to change. And, I've said it to you a number of times. Our culture is like nature, right? It'll always change and evolve, because if it doesn't, it will cease to exist. And that's just so true. And that's where we're at today. It's changing and evolving. It has to.
Just like the river, if it was held up, it'd have to change direction. Yeah. If something was blocking it, it has to change direction. Yeah. Well, I think we're done.
Lunchtime?
Where's the pizza?